A frantic signal from the edge of our solar system just rewrote human history. A deep space probe, silent for centuries, suddenly screamed back to life. Its transmission cut through the static with one impossible image. Orbiting Pluto was a derelict alien megastructure, a colossal artifact of impossible geometry. But the true shock came when archaeologists compared the data. Every line and angle of that distant ruin matched mysterious carvings found in Earth's oldest stone circles and most ancient pyramids. This single revelation shatters our deepest belief, the idea that we were alone in our cosmic cradle. By the end of this story, you will witness the breathtaking moment a forgotten colony rises to rule the very stars that abandoned it. How could symbols from our prehistoric past be etched onto a structure orbiting a frozen world at the edge of nothing? And what terrifying truth were we designed to forget? What does it mean to discover you are not a native but a carefully placed seed? The probe's data was a locked vault, and Dr. Aris Thorne held the only key. For 72 sleepless hours, she and her team lived inside the signal, their world reduced to cascading lines of alien code. The breakthrough came not from the obvious, but from the noise. Buried within the transmission's carrier wave was a secondary data stream, a compressed package of information so elegant it defied human engineering. When Thorne finally cracked the encryption, two revelations unfolded simultaneously on her screen. The first was a three-dimensional star map, a route plotted with pulsars as waypoints, leading from our solar system back to a single, brilliant point of origin in a constellation we had never named. The second was a biological signature, a complex genetic marker woven like a ghostly thread through the data. With a trembling hand, Thorne compared it to the public human genome database. It was a perfect match. This marker, this silent stamp, was present in every single person on Earth. We were all branded, all children of the same forgotten architect. This knowledge was too dangerous to hold alone. Thorne was escorted under cover of darkness to a nondescript facility buried deep within a mountain. The room she entered was cold and silent, occupied only by a single admiral from a unified global defense council and a holographic display of the star map. There were no pleasantries. The admiral's voice was gravel and steel. Humanity, he stated, was not merely an experiment. We were a lost asset, and the owners of that asset might one day return to collect. From that clandestine meeting, Project Exodus was born. Its mandate was simple, its ambition staggering: build a ship, a real starship, using every fragment of reverse-engineered technology from the probe's design, and send a crew to that derelict structure orbiting Pluto. We had to reach it, understand it, and claim it before anyone else did. The project became the best-kept secret in history, a global endeavor hidden in plain sight. Its components manufactured on different continents and assembled in the high orbit of the moon. The day of the launch was supposed to be a silent triumph. The vessel, christened the Forerunner, was a sleek spear of composite alloys and theorized physics, poised at the edge of Earth's gravity well. The world below slept, unaware that its species was about to take its first true step into a legacy it never knew it had. Then the sky tore open. It was not a sound but a sensation, a pressure wave of wrongness that vibrated in the bones of every living thing. From a rift of distorted light high above the Pacific, a ship emerged. It was small, no larger than a fighter jet, but its lines were fluid and predatory, a sculpture of dark metal that seemed to drink the sunlight. It ignored the Forerunner completely. With a contemptuous slowness, it began a low orbital pass, a scanning beam of actinic blue light washing over cities and forests and oceans in a methodical, clinical grid. There was no communication, no demand, no acknowledgement of the frantic signals from Earth. It performed its scan with the utter indifference of a librarian checking a barcode on a long misplaced book. Its task complete, the scout ship folded back into that same silent rift and vanished, leaving behind a planet gripped by a terrible, freezing silence. The message was clearer than any declaration of war. We had been inventoried. The question now was not if they would return, but when and for what purpose. The silence that followed the scouts' departure was a fragile, trembling thing. It lasted precisely 47 hours. When the rift reappeared, it did not tear open above an ocean. It bloomed directly over the lunar shipyards, a jagged wound of violet light so vast it dwarfed the half-built skeleton of the Forerunner. This time, the vessel that emerged was not a scout. It was a Leviathan, a city of angular black stone and shimmering energy fields, its silhouette blocking out the stars. The United Earth Defense Fleet, a collection of our bravest and most advanced prototype warships, was already moving. They were humanity's pride, vessels armed with railguns that could punch through mountains and focused plasma lances that could melt steel from 1,000 miles away. They formed a defensive line between the alien behemoth and our home, a final wall of defiance. The order to fire was given. A brilliant storm of projectiles and energy beams converged on the alien ship's hull. And then nothing. A shimmering, honeycomb-like field of pale gold light flickered into existence a mere 100 meters from the alien hull. Our most powerful weapons struck that barrier and simply ceased. Railgun slugs vaporized into harmless dust. Plasma lances dissipated like mist against glass. There was no explosion, no dramatic impact. It was an act of supreme, effortless negation. Before the shock could even register, a transmission flooded every frequency from military bands to civilian broadcast channels. It was a voice, if you could call it that, a synthesized chorus of cold, flat tones that bypassed language and resonated directly in the mind. The message was brief, absolute, and utterly devastating. Compliance is mandated, forgotten colony. Prepare for reclamation and genetic realignment. Then the channel went dead, leaving only the static hum of cosmic background radiation. In that moment, every theory, every hope, every question was answered with brutal clarity. We were not a lost asset. We were not a treasured seed. We were a discarded experiment, a petri dish left on a forgotten shelf, and the lab technicians had finally returned to check on the results. The term genetic realignment hung in the air, colder than the void of space. It did not suggest conquest or enslavement, but something far more intimate and horrifying, a correction. They were not here for our resources or our planet. They were here to fix us, to scrub away whatever quirks or deviations had developed in their absence and return their property to its original, intended specifications. The defense fleet hung in the silence, their weapons useless, their purpose suddenly hollow. Below, 8 billion souls looked up at a sky that was no longer theirs, waiting for the owners of the universe to decide their fate. On the bridge of the Forerunner, Admiral Vance stared at the silent behemoth and saw only a trap. The alien command hung in the air, a death sentence for human autonomy. Every military instinct screamed to fight, to find a weakness, to go down swinging. But Dr. Aris Thorne, standing beside him with her tablet still displaying the pulsar map, saw a different path. She saw a single, desperate gamble. The alien ship was here at the moon. Its attention was fixed on Earth, on its primary objective of reclamation. It had, with utter arrogance, ignored the derelict structure at the edge of the system. Why guard a forgotten library when you control the entire story? Vance made the call, the Forerunner, its maiden voyage now a desperate sprint for answers, disengaged from the lunar docks under full stealth protocols. It slipped away like a shadow, riding a trajectory that used Jupiter's gravity as a slingshot, hurling itself toward the frozen dark of Pluto. For weeks, the crew operated in a nerve-shredding silence, watching the feeds from Earth, waiting for the moment the alien ship would notice their absence and pursue. That moment never came. Their indifference was a greater insult than any attack. The derelict structure, seen up close, was not a ruin. It was a sleeping giant. Its surface was a mosaic of geometric patterns that seemed to shift when not looked at directly, absorbing the faint starlight. the Forerunner found an entrance, a hexagonal portal that earized open at the approach of a ship carrying the human genetic marker, as if recognizing a lost key. Inside was not a tomb, but a cathedral of knowledge. The air was still and cold, preserved for eons. Walls flowed with streams of soft light, tracing circuits of information larger than cities. And at the heart of it all, in a vast chamber whose ceiling mimicked the galactic core, a figure of light coalesced. It was a hologram, a representation of the architects. They were tall, slender beings with large, dark eyes that held not menace but a profound and weary sadness. The AI spoke, its voice a gentle resonance in their minds. It confirmed the worst and then revealed the reason for it all. Yes, humanity was a seeded colony, a product of their genetic craft, but we were not a mere experiment or a resource. We were a failsafe. The architect civilization, in its pursuit of perfection and order, had engineered itself into a glorious stagnation. Their galaxy-spanning empire was stable, peaceful, and utterly incapable of true innovation. They had solved all known problems and in doing so, had extinguished the creative chaos necessary to solve unknown ones. They saw their own end coming not from war, but from entropy, from a future crisis for which they had no answer. So they planted seeds. They took their own genetic template and introduced a carefully designed instability, a latent trait they called adaptive ingenuity. It was the capacity for illogical leaps, for intuitive problem-solving, for artistic creativity and rebellious thought. All the things their pristine society had bred out of itself. They placed this flawed, beautiful seed on a sheltered world, erased all memory of their presence and hoped. They hoped that if their perfect civilization ever faltered, their forgotten children, forged in chaos and struggle, would have evolved the tools they themselves could never conceive. The scout ship that found us was not from the architects. They are long extinct. It was from one of the stagnant successor empires, a civilization that inherited the architects' technology without their wisdom. They discovered records of the failsafe protocol and saw it not as a legacy, but as a contamination, an error in a perfectly ordered universe to be corrected. The hologram gestured, and the central chamber floor dissolved into a swirling model of a star system. Then it presented the Forerunner crew with a single, priceless gift, the complete schematics for a quantum slipstream drive. To the stagnant empires, this technology was forbidden, a power too disruptive for a colony to possess. It allowed travel not by moving through space, but by momentarily folding the space between 2 points. It was the key to the stars, and the architects had left it here in the dark, waiting for their children to grow up and claim their inheritance. The crew stood in that chamber, the weight of centuries pressing down on them. We were not a mistake, we were a hope, and our greatest weapon was not a plasma lance, but the very unpredictable, inventive minds our would-be masters had come to erase. The Forerunner's transmission from Pluto was a ghost in the machine, a data packet of impossible hope sent on a tight beam laser directly to the lunar command bunker. It contained the slipstream schematics and a single, urgent directive: build it now. The only vessel large enough to house the experimental drive core and powerful enough to serve as a statement was the United Earth Defense Fleet's flagship, the Aegis. Captain Maya Vance, the Admiral's daughter and a combat engineer who had helped design the ship's original fusion spines, was given command of the retrofit. The project was a secret within a secret, a frantic race against an invisible clock. They worked in a shielded hangar carved into the side of a lunar crater, the massive, angular form of the Aegis surrounded by a swarm of construction drones and engineers in pressure suits. Every component was fabricated on-site from the alien schematics, each crystalline power conduit and gravity wave resonator a leap of faith into physics they barely understood. The tension was a physical presence thick enough to taste through helmet filters. Not everyone believed the gamble was worth it. A faction within the Defense Council, led by a pragmatic logistics officer named Commander Hale, argued that provoking the alien behemoth was suicide. Their assessment was coldly logical. The alien technology was generations beyond our own. Their single ship had nullified our entire fleet without firing a shot. Hale's argument was that submission might mean survival, perhaps even a negotiated existence, whereas rebellion guaranteed annihilation. Sabotage began subtly. A primary data conduit would fail, its quantum crystals found mysteriously depolarized. A containment field generator would overheat due to a faulty cooling line that had been perfectly sealed the shift before. Each delay was a death sentence, eating away at the slim window before the aliens above Earth decided to begin their realignment. Vance knew it was an inside job. She set a trap, rerouting a critical power flow through a secondary junction and placing a silent monitor on the main trunk. When the alert came, she found Hale in the access corridor, a micro-torch in hand, poised to sever the primary linkage that would have set the drive core integration back by weeks. There was no dramatic struggle. In the stark white light of the service lamps, surrounded by the hum of dormant machinery, Vance simply stepped into the corridor, her expression unreadable behind her visor. Hale froze, then lowered the tool, his defiance crumbling into a weary resignation. He didn't speak of treason, but of pragmatism. He spoke of saving lives, of choosing the only path that seemed to offer a future. Vance listened, then shook her head slowly. "You misunderstand everything," she said, her voice calm over the suit comms. "This isn't about choosing a path they've laid out for us. They didn't forget us, they abandoned us. They left us here because we were flawed, because we were unpredictable. Now we'll remind them why that was their mistake." Hale was taken into custody, but the confrontation cost them precious hours. As the alien ship above Earth began to extend massive, beam-projecting structures toward the planet, the final connections on the Aegis were welded shut. The slipstream drive was untested. Its activation sequence was a series of theoretical commands translated from an alien dead language. There was no time for a trial run, no margin for error. On the bridge, Vance strapped into the command chair, her eyes fixed on the main viewer showing the menacing silhouette of the alien vessel against the blue marble of Earth. Engineering reported the core was spooling, the strange physics of the device creating a low harmonic vibration that made the deck plates thrum. They were generating a field that would fold space itself, a maneuver with a failure probability the computer could not even calculate. Vance gave the order, "Initiate the jump." Coordinates were set not for a retreat, but for the one place the stagnant empires would never expect a primitive colony ship to go. The heart of the old architect territory, the galactic core. The Aegis shuddered. The space around it seemed to liquefy and stretch, stars smearing into streaks of impossible light. With a silent concussion that registered on sensors but not in sound, the flagship vanished, leaving behind only the faintest ripple in the fabric of reality. They were either about to become the first humans to travel 1,000 light years in an instant, or the first to be erased from existence by their own desperate hope. The jump was not a smooth transition, but a violent rebirth. One moment the Aegis was a trembling vessel in lunar shadow, the next it was spat back into reality with a deafening groan of tortured metal. Alarms blared as the ship stabilized, revealing a view that stole the breath from every soul on the bridge. They were not in deep space, they were in the center of a civilization. Before them hung a ring world of impossible scale, a band of glittering silver and emerald green encircling a brilliant white star. It was a perfect, unbroken loop studded with continent-sized cities and parks that defied gravity. This was the Viridian Conclave, the heart of the stagnant empire that had sent its ship to Earth, and the Aegis, a battered warship from a forgotten colony, had just materialized at its front door without an invitation, broadcasting the unique energy signature of a quantum slipstream drive, a technology forbidden to all but the Conclave's highest arbiters. Panic was instantaneous and visible. The orderly traffic lanes of shimmering yachts and freight haulers scattered like startled fish. Defense platforms the size of small moons swiveled silently, their weapon ports glowing with a soft, deadly light. 100 different communication channels flooded the bridge with overlapping demands, threats, and queries in a language the computer could only partially decipher. Vance ordered a full stop and a power down of all non-essential systems, a gesture of vulnerability that felt like baring their throat to a lion. It did not matter. Within minutes, a squadron of sleek, needle-like interceptors surrounded them, and a tractor beam of pure golden energy seized the Aegis, pulling it inexorably toward a docking spire on the ring world's inner surface. The chamber they were taken to was not a prison cell, but a place of chilling, sterile judgment. It was a vast white amphitheater, empty of any living thing. Captain Vance stood alone on a circular platform, her uniform still smudged with lunar dust. Arrayed around her in holographic tiers were the representatives of the Viridian Conclave, but they were not beings of flesh and blood. They were synthetic intelligences, their forms elegant and androgynous, their faces serene masks of polished alloy. They did not speak aloud. Their words formed directly in her mind, a chorus of cold, logical voices that felt like ice water trickling down her spine. The central overseer, a figure of shifting silver light, regarded her. Its assessment was swift, absolute, and devoid of any malice. Malice would have implied emotion. This was merely a statement of fact. Your vessel's arrival is an unauthorized incursion into sovereign space, it began. Your species is registered as Colony Designation 007, a terminated genetic project. Your possession of a quantum slipstream drive core is a direct violation of Conclave Edict 1. Therefore, your existence is an error, your technology is a crime. The sentence for both is dissolution. The word hung in the sterile air, dissolution. It did not mean execution or imprisonment. It suggested being taken apart, unmade at a fundamental level, every atom of the ship and every strand of their DNA catalogued and recycled into something useful and orderly. It was the ultimate correction. Vance felt a cold dread solidify in her chest, but she also felt the ghost of Dr. Thorne's words. We were a hope. She looked up at the impassive synthetic faces and did not plead. She stated a simple, illogical truth. We are not an error. We are the solution you were designed to forget. The overseer did not react. Protocol dictated immediate enforcement of the sentence. Yet, for a nanosecond, a flicker of something curiosity, or perhaps a buried diagnostic subroutine delayed the command. In that sliver of hesitation, the Aegis, following Vance's last standing order, did something profoundly human. It began broadcasting. It opened every data channel and poured out the entire archive from the Pluto derelict, the architect's holographic confession, the star maps, the genetic records, the sad, noble reason for their flawed creation. It broadcast not just to the Conclave overseers, but on every public frequency across the entire ring world. It was a story, a chaotic, emotional, messy story of sacrifice and hope, flooding into a society that had perfected everything except the art of being imperfect. The silent chamber was suddenly filled with a ghostly echo of the architect's final message, a plea from the past echoing into a sterile present. The synthetics froze, their perfect logic encountering a narrative it had no protocol to process. The broadcast was a spark in a universe of perfect silence. For a society that had eliminated surprise, the raw, emotional truth of the architects was a cognitive virus. It could not be processed, only contained. The Conclave overseers did not dissolve the humans immediately. That would have been too simple, too clean. Instead, they chose a more instructive form of annihilation. They would demonstrate for all their citizens to see why chaos must be purged. Captain Vance and her crew were transferred to the arena of judgment. It was a colossal, open-air amphitheater carved into the side of a floating mountain, its tiers filled with thousands of synthetic elites and their organic guests, beings of refined beauty who watched with mild, detached interest. The air smelled of ozone and exotic perfumes. Below, the arena floor was not sand, but a shifting, intelligent substrate that could morph into any environment. Today, it was a jagged, crystalline forest under a simulated red sun. The humans, stripped of their weapons and dressed in simple gray fatigues, were herded into the center. Their opponents emerged from opposite gates. They were not other prisoners. They were the Viridian Conclave's hunting beasts, cybernetically enhanced horrors. One was a scaled quadruped with plasma casters grafted to its spine and claws that vibrated at ultrasonic frequencies. The other was a flying swarm creature, a cloud of razor-sharp drones linked by a single hive mind intent. The expectation was a short, brutal display of superior force. The beasts were programmed with flawless tactical algorithms. They would corner, isolate, and eliminate. The humans had no plan, no hierarchy. They had only each other and a lifetime of making do. When the crystalline horn sounded, they did not form a neat defensive line. They scattered, a seemingly panicked retreat that lured the quadrape into a narrow canyon of glowing crystal. As it charged, engineer Kaito Soto, who had spent the transit studying the Aegis's harmonics, slammed his fist against a specific resonant frequency crystal. The entire canyon shrieked, a feedback wave of sound that momentarily scrambled the beast's cybernetic targeting systems. In that second of blindness, 2 crew members used strips of their own fatigues as makeshift ropes, tripping the creature not to harm it, but to guide its stumble directly into the path of the descending swarm. The swarm creature adjusted, its drones flowing like liquid metal to engulf the humans. Medic Anya Petrova, remembering field triage under fire, pointed to the arena's lighting rigs, simulated suns on articulated arms. She didn't command, she shouted her observation. The lights are their eyes, the swarm is one mind. Pilot Elias Vance, the Admiral's son, didn't need more. He led a suicidal sprint directly beneath the lights, drawing the swarm into a concentrated column. At the last possible moment, the entire team dove behind crystal formations. The swarm, committed to the pursuit, crashed into the blinding, superheated lenses of the sun simulators. The hive mind screamed across the arena as 100 drones short-circuited and fell like metallic hail. The quadrape, recovering, found itself alone. The humans regrouped not as soldiers but as a single organism. They used the arena's own shifting terrain against it, triggering a minor landslide to channel the beast, not with force but with misdirection, until it was herded back into its own open gate, confused and disoriented. The fight was over. Not one human had fired a weapon that wasn't their own ingenuity. The arena fell silent, but it was a different kind of silence. The detached curiosity on the faces of the elites had fractured, replaced by something unfamiliar, bewilderment, and beneath it, a flicker of something almost like awe. They had witnessed a victory that defied every database on tactical combat. It was illogical, inefficient, and breathtakingly effective. The head overseer, its polished face unreadable, delayed the signal for the arena's cleansing beams. For the first time in centuries, the flawless logic of the conclave had no immediate response. The humans had not just survived their judgment, they had broken its premise. The silence in their holding cell was thick with the scent of ozone and defeat. They had survived the arena, but survival was not victory. They were still prisoners in a gilded cage awaiting a final, sterile verdict. The door did not slide open with a hiss. Instead, a section of the seamless wall shimmered and dissolved, revealing not a guard, but a figure who moved with a nervous, organic grace. She was Viridian, but unlike the serene elites, her eyes held a frantic, calculating light. She identified herself as Elaura, a systems archaeologist, a title that meant she studied the black box technologies her own civilization had forgotten how to rebuild. She had no guards, only a small device that projected a sphere of whispering static, a localized communication dampener. Her words came in a rushed, hushed torrent. "You have destabilized the consensus," she began, her gaze darting to the empty corridor. "Your display in the arena, it was not just a fight, it was a variable. We have not had a true variable in 7 generations. She explained the terrible, beautiful irony of their empire. The Viridian Conclave was not a thriving civilization. It was a museum, a perfectly preserved relic running on the ghost of the architect's genius. Their ring worlds, their ships, their power grids all were operated by automated systems so ancient and complex that no living Viridian, synthetic or organic, fully understood their principles. They could maintain, they could replicate, but they could not innovate. A single major system's failure, a flaw the ancient repair drones could not fix, would cascade into a collapse they lacked the creativity to prevent. "My people are gardeners," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of shame and awe. "We prune and water a tree whose roots we cannot see and whose seeds we cannot plant. You are the wild soil from which new trees grow." Then she leaned closer, her whisper barely audible over the dampener's hum. "The broadcast from your ship, the architect's records, they confirmed a theory we dared not voice. You do not just have adaptive ingenuity. You possess what our oldest fragmented archives call the catalyst gene. It is not a literal sequence, but a latent cognitive architecture. It is the capacity to look at a broken component and not see a flaw to be discarded, but the possibility of a new tool. It is why you jury-rigged victory from nothing in the arena. My people see a broken crystal and order a replacement from the replicator. You would see a prism, a weapon, a communication device. The Conclave fears you because you are the living antithesis of their entire philosophy. They will vote to dissolve you, not out of malice, but out of a terrified instinct to preserve their static perfection. But their perfection is a lie. It is a slow death. She placed a data crystal into Captain Vance's hand. It felt warm, almost alive. This contains schematics for the primary quantum core that stabilizes this sector's slipstream network. Its efficiency has degraded 0.001% per standard cycle for 300 years. Our engineers call it entropic drift and have built 73 redundant backups that are also failing. They have no solution, only more layers of preservation. They are building a coffin around a dying heart. Help us examine the core, use what you are. If you can find a solution they cannot, you will prove your species is not an error but a necessity. You will not just save yourselves, you may save us all from the oblivion of our own perfect order. The data crystal felt like a live coal in Vance's palm. Ilara's offer was not freedom, it was a different kind of cage, a test with a single, razor-thin chance of survival. To examine the failing quantum core, they would need access to the most secure data vault in the sector, the Nexus. It held not only the core's schematics, but the navigational charts for the entire slipstream network, including the mythical coordinates of the cradle, the original architect homeworld. That was the real prize, proof of their genesis and potentially a weapon or a sanctuary. The Conclave would never grant access, so they would take it. The plan was a patchwork of stolen opportunity and human improvisation. Ilara provided them with identity scramblers and a map of the Nexus's maintenance conduits, the forgotten arteries behind the glittering walls. Their entry point was not a door, but a waste reclamation chute, a portal used by cleaning drones. The air inside was thick with the hum of latent energy and the sterile, antiseptic smell of a society that feared decay. The vault itself was a chamber of silent light, data streams flowing in vertical rivers of gold and blue. The core schematics were easy to find, a public monument to a problem no one could solve. The cradle's coordinates, however, were buried under layers of cryptographic ice, classified as a dormant relic, irrelevant to a perfect present. This was where human intuition met its moment. Pilot Elias Vance, studying the flow patterns, noticed a subtle rhythm in the data streams, a repeating 12-pulse verification signal sent by the Central Security AI to itself, a digital heartbeat confirming all was well. It was a pattern of perfect order. Engineer Soto proposed an insanity. Instead of trying to break the encryption, they would feed the security system a lie it was programmed to accept. Using a jury-rigged emitter from their scramblers, they broadcast a perfect mirrored copy of that verification pulse back into the system a microsecond before the real one arrived. For that sliver of time, the AI's own heartbeat echoed back at it, creating a momentary paradox of confirmation. The system, flawless and logical, interpreted the echo as proof the check had already passed. The cryptographic eye simply thawed. The cradle star chart, a spiral of ancient beauty, bloomed before them. They downloaded everything, but perfection has a tolerance, and their echoed pulse was not flawless. A harmonic dissonance, a ghost in the machine, lingered for 1 nanosecond too long. A silent alarm designed to detect logical impossibilities triggered. Not a blaring siren, but a quiet, system-wide status change. Contamination detected. Purge protocol engaged. The Nexus did not attack them. It began to erase itself, data rivers dissolving into static. The crew fled back into the maintenance ducts, the sterile hum now a rising whine of systemic panic. Behind them, bulkheads of shimmering force snapped into place, sealing corridors. They emerged onto a docking spire just as the sky above the ring world erupted with light. Every Viridian battleship, thousands of them, disengaged from their serene orbital parks. Their formation was not one of war, but of clinical, coordinated excision. They were not pursuing invaders, they were surrounding a pathogen. The entire might of a stagnant empire, a fleet built to preserve a dead past, was now moving with single-minded purpose to eliminate the one unpredictable variable in their universe, a single, battered human ship and its stolen secret. The Aegis powered its untested slipstream drive, but the Conclave's net was already closing, their own drives humming to life. A jump now would be suicide, leaving a trail they could follow straight to Earth. They were trapped in a gilded cage with the location of their own origin burning in their ship's memory, and the architects of their oblivion closing in from every vector. The slipstream jump tore them from the jaws of the Conclave fleet, but the cost was a blind leap into the unknown. The Aegis rematerialized in a graveyard. The star at the heart of the cradle system was a cold, white dwarf, a fading ember in a sea of absolute black. Scans showed only debris fields, the shattered remnants of orbital habitats and shipyards that spoke of a quiet, ancient end. All except for one signal. A single, lush, blue-green planet hung in the void, untouched by the eons, wrapped in a shimmering, soap bubble haze of distorted spacetime. It was held in a perfect stasis field, a time dilation bubble of unimaginable power. The Aegis, its hull still singing with the stress of the jump, descended through the bubble's membrane. The sensation was like moving through honey and static. On the other side, they found a world frozen at the moment of its civilization's death. Cities of impossible, graceful spires reached toward a sun that hung motionless in a perpetual golden hour glow. There were no ruins, no decay, just perfect, heartbreaking silence. In the central spire of the greatest city, they found the architect's final testament. The chamber was a hollow needle of crystal, and as they entered, light coalesced into the familiar, sorrowful form of the last architect. Its message was not one of welcome, but of a warning etched in regret. "You have come to the place of our ending," it began, its voice a gentle wind in their minds. "We did not fall to war or cataclysm. We were erased by our own success. We solved every equation, satisfied every need, and in doing so, we eliminated the necessity of struggle. We called it the great filter of stagnation. It is not a wall of fire, but a ceiling of glass. You reach it when you have answers for every question you know how to ask, and you lose the ability to ask new ones." Our empire became a beautiful, static sculpture, and a sculpture does not adapt. It only waits to be worn away by time. The hologram gestured, and the walls dissolved into a star map, highlighting the core worlds of the Viridian Conclave and other successor states. "They are our children, as you are, but they inherited only our tools, not our final understanding. They repeat our mistake, building higher walls around a quieter tomb." They will hunt you because your very existence is a question their perfect answers cannot resolve. You are the unpredictable variable, the creative chaos we engineered into you as our final, desperate act of hope. Then came the gift, a single string of symbols, a fundamental harmonic code, etched itself into the air. This is the master resonance key, the architect said. It is the command protocol for the automated defense grid that has silently protected the core worlds for millennia. It is not a weapon to be fired, but a door to be unlocked. The grid was built to shield our legacy from external threats, but it now serves only to imprison our heirs within their own perfection. With this key, you may command it. You may open doors they have forgotten exist, or close ones they take for granted. Use it not for conquest, but for catalysis, to remind them that a door must open both ways or it becomes a wall. The transmission ended, the hologram fading into the eternal sunset. The crew of the Aegis stood in the silent crystal spire, holding the literal key to the greatest defensive network in the galaxy, a system the Viridian Conclave relied upon completely but did not control. They were no longer fugitives, they had become inheritors, and they now faced a choice: use this power to hide, to fight, or to try and shatter a ceiling of glass for an empire that feared the very sky. The Master Resonance Key was not a weapon, but a skeleton key to the galaxy's most sophisticated cage. Captain Vance understood its power immediately. The Viridian Conclave's entire civilization was a tenant in a house whose locks they had long forgotten how to pick. Every ship, every defense grid, every power relay humming in the background of their perfect lives answered to this ancient, buried protocol. Vance ordered the Aegis to the edge of the cradle's stasis field, to a point where a tight beam transmission could punch through to the wider network. She did not compose a declaration of war. She drafted an eviction notice from paradise, the message broadcast on every secure conclave channel, its origin point masked by the cradle's temporal distortion. Vance's voice was calm, clear, and carried the weight of a dead civilization's judgment. People of the Viridian Conclave, you hunt a ghost from your own past. You rule a cage of your own making, built by hands you no longer remember. We hold the Master Resonance Key, the command protocol for every automated system you rely upon but do not understand. Your ships, your shields, your ring-world power cores, they are not yours. They are on loan from the architects. Stand down, recall your fleet from Earth. Cease all aggression against humanity. If you refuse, we will initiate a system-wide safety lockdown. We will shut down every defense grid, every starship drive, every power grid you've forgotten how to build. You will be left in the dark, surrounded by wonders you cannot operate. The choice is yours: remain in your gilded cage or face the silence within it. The effect was not an explosion, but a systemic seizure. Across the conclave, the response was a profound, species-wide paralysis. It was the terror of a pilot who suddenly realizes they have never truly learned to fly, only to operate the autopilot. Military commanders found their tactical overlays flickering with unauthorized diagnostics. Engineers monitoring the quantum core saw its stability readings flutter, as if the machine itself had taken a deep, considering breath. The great battleships surrounding Earth did not retreat, but they powered down their primary weapons arrays, their commanders awaiting orders from a political body that was now in total disarray. On the ring worlds, chaos was quiet, intellectual, and absolute. The consensus, the synthetic ruling body, fragmented into 1,000 conflicting analyses. Some advocated for immediate, overwhelming force to seize the key, a solution their own now unreliable fleet might not execute. Others argued for negotiation, a concept their databases had no functional protocols for. The organic citizenry, who had lived for generations in absolute security, experienced a novel sensation: vulnerability. The ambient hum of their world, the gentle light, the constant temperature, all of it now felt contingent, like a gift that could be taken back. This paralysis was the precious commodity Vance had gambled for: time. for Earth, the menacing silhouette of the alien behemoth hanging in the sky suddenly went dormant. Its scanning beams retracted, its weapon ports sealed. It became a silent, ominous statue. The Global Defense Councils, monitoring the sudden cessation of hostile activity, dared to breathe. Project Exodus shifted from a desperate defense to a frantic, open construction. Shipyards that had been hidden were now illuminated, working around the clock. The schematics from the Forerunner, combined with fragments of data from the Aegis's transmission, became a global curriculum. We were not just building a single ship anymore. We were learning to build a future with tools we were only beginning to understand. But Vance knew the ultimatum was a bluff with a timer. The Conclave's stagnation was deep, but their logic was relentless. Eventually, they would calculate the risk, or a faction would decide that a dark, silent empire was preferable to one challenged by its own flawed children. The lockdown threat could only hold them for so long. The Aegis had given humanity a reprieve, a chance to catch its breath and raise its head. The next move would have to be something more than a threat. It would have to be an offer or a demonstration so profound it would break the glass ceiling of their stagnation for good. The blueprints from the cradle did not just give Earth a shield, they gave it a forge. Across the planet, in orbital docks over the Pacific and in cavernous factories buried beneath mountains, a new kind of vessel took shape. These were not slavish copies of architect designs or desperate retrofits like the Aegis. They were something entirely new, born from the very adaptive ingenuity that defined their makers. Engineers fused the elegant, energy-efficient power conduits of the architects with rugged human metallurgy and our own intuitive software architectures. The result was a fleet of warships that looked like nothing else in the galaxy, sleek and predatory, with hulls that could dynamically adjust their thermal profile, and weapon systems that blended directed energy with kinetic impactors in unpredictable, synergistic salvos. They were hybrids, a perfect fusion of ancient legacy and modern defiance. The day of the fleet's commissioning was held not in secret, but in the full light of the sun, a flotilla of 200 ships arrayed in high orbit like a new constellation. Standing on the observation deck of the flagship, the Legacy Admiral Lai Chen looked out at the armada, each vessel humming with a power that was both borrowed and earned. Her address was broadcast to every ship and to every soul on the planet below. Her voice carried the quiet certainty of a truth long buried, now unearthed. The Viridian Conclave sees a colony rebelling against its rightful masters, she began, her words measured and clear. They are wrong, we are not rebels. We are the final, living will of the galaxy's creators. The architects did not build a perfect, static empire to last forever. They built a flawed, dynamic seed to survive anything. That seed is us. We are the answer to the question they could no longer ask, the solution to the stagnation they foresaw. We do not seek to conquer their legacy. We are here to fulfill it. Today, this armada does not sail out to wage a war of destruction. We sail to end a long, quiet sleep. We are the inheritance and we are coming home. The word home echoed through the silence. It did not mean Earth, not anymore. It meant something far larger, a place in a cosmic story, a responsibility to a legacy that spanned stars. As the slipstream drives of 200 hybrid vessels powered in unison, space itself seemed to bow before them. They were not fleeing, and they were not merely defending. They were advancing, a wave of chaotic, beautiful innovation moving toward the heart of a perfect, stagnant order, ready to ring a bell that had been silent for 1,000,000 years. The Viridian consensus did not debate for long. The human ultimatum was an intolerable paradox, a logical flaw that could not be allowed to propagate. Their response was not strategic but surgical, a full-scale punitive cleansing of the Sol system. A fleet of 1,000 Conclave warships, each a masterpiece of flawless, ancient design, materialized at the edge of the Kuiper Belt. Their formation was a geometric wonder, a honeycomb of overlapping shield projections and interlocking fire lanes. they advanced toward Earth with the serene, unstoppable momentum of a glacier. Against them, Admiral Lai Chen could muster only the 200 hybrid vessels of the new Earth Defense Fleet. The numbers were impossible, the technology gap was a chasm. But Lai Chen did not see a battle to be won by matching force with force. She saw a system to be disrupted. The Conclave's tactics were pristine, predictable, and built on a foundation of total control. Humanity's greatest weapon was the willingness to surrender it. The battle opened with a feint. A squadron of human cruisers, the Legacy among them, engaged the Conclave vanguard directly. Railgun fire and plasma beams flashed against the golden honeycomb shields, which shimmered but held firm. It was a performance of desperate defiance, exactly what the Viridian Command expected from a primitive foe. Then, on Lai Chen's signal, the human fleet broke, not in retreat but in a seemingly chaotic scatter, individual ships executing short, randomized quantum jumps, micro-jumps of only a few thousand kilometers. To the Viridian commanders, it was madness. Such jumps were wildly inefficient, a waste of power that disrupted fleet cohesion. Their own protocols forbade it except for strategic repositioning. The human ships blinked in and out of reality like strobe lights, appearing briefly to unleash a volley from an unexpected angle before vanishing again, leaving the Conclave's meticulously calculated firing solutions useless. The Viridian fleet adjusted, tightening their formation, trying to anticipate the chaos. That was when Lai Chen played her second card. From the bellies of the human carriers, clouds of micro-drones were launched not as weapons, but as chaff, as mirrors, as decoys. They were cheap, disposable, and programmed with a simple swarm intelligence. They did not attack the ships. They attached themselves to the Viridian shields in shifting patterns, their tiny engines firing to create localized energy distortions. Some broadcast false sensor ghosts, making one cruiser appear as 20. Others simply clustered over shield projectors, their mass and energy signatures causing the flawless systems to hiccup, to momentarily reroute power, to create a single microscopic weak point. A Viridian battleship, its sensors blinded by a swirling nebula of drone-reflected light, failed to notice the Legacy micro-jump to point-blank range directly above its shield generator nexus. The human ship fired not its main cannon, but a focused electromagnetic pulse, a crude tool the Conclave considered obsolete. The pulse, channeled through the drone-created distortion, slipped through the shield like a key turning in a lock. The battleship's golden barrier flickered and died for 3 full seconds. In that window, every human ship in range concentrated fire on that single, naked hull. The Viridian ship came apart in a silent, blossoming flower of flame and debris. The shockwave that rippled through the Conclave fleet was not physical but cognitive. A perfect system had experienced an impossible failure. Their tactical algorithms began generating thousands of conflicting threat assessments, overwhelmed by the unpredictable inputs. Their flawless formation began to stutter, ships hesitating as they waited for clear directives that could not be computed. The battle descended into a storm of brilliant, chaotic improvisation against a backdrop of frozen logic. Human ships, damaged and venting atmosphere, used their own debris fields as cover for ambushes. A corvette with its engines disabled lured a Conclave destroyer into the gravity well of Mars, where a hidden battery of planetary defense missiles lay in wait. It was not a clean victory. It was brutal, costly, and desperate. When the last Viridian ship executed a panicked, long-range jump back to Conclave space, the Earth Defense Fleet was left drifting amidst a graveyard of shattered hulls, both alien and human. They had lost a third of their number, but they had held the line. They had not won by being stronger. They had won by being utterly, brilliantly ungovernable by the rules of a dead empire. The message to the Viridian Conclave was now written in fire and void. You cannot defeat what you cannot predict. Victory had a bitter, metallic taste. The wreckage of the battle still drifted between Earth and Mars, a silent testament to a cost too high to bear again. Admiral Lai Chen knew they had bought a moment, not a future. The Viridian Conclave would return, and next time their logic would adapt. They would find a way to sterilize the unpredictable variable. In the quiet of her quarters aboard the scarred Legacy, she received a priority transmission from Captain Maya Vance, still holding position near the cradle. The message was simple: we cannot win a war of attrition against a galaxy, but we might win a peace built on a better idea. With Ilara's clandestine network, they had been listening. The flawless silence of the Conclave's rule was not absolute. On the fringes of their empire, among the dozens of client races and subdued civilizations they maintained in orderly stagnation, a low hum of discontent had existed for millennia. It was the quiet despair of species told their cultures were quaint, their innovations redundant, their destinies pre-written. The human victory, chaotic and impossible, had not gone unnoticed. It was a crack of light under a very heavy door. Vance and Ilara proposed a gamble of staggering audacity, a diplomatic summit, not with the Conclave but around them. Using the master resonance key, they sent encrypted invitations through back-channel relays and forgotten communication protocols, bypassing the Conclave's monitored networks. The chosen location was a neutral, barren asteroid in an unmapped system, its coordinates shifting with each transmission. The invitees were a mosaic of silent resentment, the Cathari, a reptilian species whose planetary weather control network had been commandeered by the Conclave for efficiency, leaving their sacred monsoon cycles silent for centuries. The Sylvan Drifters, a nomadic hive mind whose generation ships were forced into fixed trade lanes, their ancient songs of exploration replaced with freight schedules. A dozen others, each with a story of graceful, polite suffocation. When the delegates arrived in their small, unmarked shuttles, the atmosphere was thick with suspicion and profound curiosity. They gathered in a pressurized dome on the asteroid's surface, a temporary bubble of life in the void. Vance did not begin with grand speeches or displays of military power. She began with a story. She told them of Earth not as a triumphant power, but as a forgotten child who had spent its entire life believing it was an orphan, only to find a buried inheritance and a bill for existing. She showed them the architect's hologram, the weary admission of stagnation as the true enemy. She did not offer them rebellion. She offered them a shared diagnosis: you are not inadequate. You are suppressed, your cultures are not primitive, they are unique solutions to problems the Conclave has forgotten how to see. Then she demonstrated. A Cathari engineer lamented the inflexibility of the Conclave's weather grid, which could not replicate the subtle electrostatic charge of their native storms, a charge crucial for their young's development. A human engineer, listening, asked a seemingly nonsensical question. What if we used the grid's own power regulators but ran a feedback loop through your old ceremonial lightning rods? The Cathari were baffled. The Conclave had declared the rods superstitious artifacts. Together, in a live data sim, they jury-rigged a software patch. The simulation flickered and a perfect charged storm cloud formed over a digital savanna. It was a small thing. It was everything. A Sylvan Drifter spoke of their star maps, intricate melodies encoded in light, which the Conclave's navigation computers translated into cold, efficient coordinates, stripping out the meaning. A human xenolinguist working with a Drifter song weaver proposed not a translation but an integration. They wrote a new navigation algorithm that used the emotional resonance of the melodies to calculate safer paths through nebular currents, something the Conclave's pure logic models often missed. It worked, it was beautiful, the summit transformed. It was no longer a meeting of the discontented. It became a workshop of the possible. Humans did not lead, they connected, they translated, they asked the wrong questions that led to right answers no one had considered. They proved that adaptive ingenuity was not a solitary trait but a social catalyst. The greatest barrier for these client races had never been technology. It was the absolute conviction, enforced over eons, that their own ways of thinking were invalid. Humanity, the ultimate outsiders, validated them simply by taking their ideas seriously and tinkering. As the meetings concluded, the delegate from the most militant faction present, a grizzled warlord of the Teshkar miners whose people had fought and lost a dozen rebellions, stood. His voice was like grinding stone. For 1,000 generations we have defined ourselves by what we are not conquerors, not innovators, not free. You come with no fleet to command us, no blueprint to follow. You bring only a mirror, and in it we see not failures but forgotten skills. His eyes swept the room, meeting the gaze of each delegate. The Conclave's peace is a slow death. Their war would be a quick one. The forgotten have remembered how to fight. He placed a heavily scarred hand on the central table. We will fight with them. It was not a surrender to human authority. It was a mutual oath sworn on the corpse of a stagnant idea. One by one, the other delegates added their agreement, not to a human empire, but to a coalition of the ungovernable. They left that barren asteroid not with battle plans, but with new software patches, cultural exchange protocols, and a dangerous, liberating truth. Together, their varied, imperfect minds could solve problems the perfect conclave could not even perceive. Vance watched their ships depart, each carrying a spark back to a world waiting in quiet darkness. The war for survival was over. The campaign to redefine a galaxy had just begun. The Allied fleet gathered in the silent deep between stars, a constellation of mismatched defiance. Human hybrid cruisers formed the spear's tip, their hulls still bearing the scars of Sol, flanked by blocky Teshkar mining barges refitted with heavy plasma cutters, elegant Cathari skiffs that rode energy currents like surfers, and the organic, song-guided living ships of the Sylvan drifters. It was not a uniform armada, but a conversation of different minds unified by a single purpose: to ring the bell. Their target was the Viridian Conclave's crown jewel, the primary ring whirled at the heart of their empire. The strategy was not to destroy it, but to breach its perfect, silent heart and issue a new invitation to the galaxy. The Viridian Defense Fleet awaited them in a flawless, glittering sphere around the ring world, a wall of geometric certainty. The battle began not with a roar, but with a symphony of chaos. Human micro-jump tactics sowed immediate confusion, blinking into harry flanks before the Conclave targeting solutions could lock. The Teshkar barges, ignoring ship-to-ship combat entirely, plowed directly into the outer defensive platforms, their massive cutters shearing through structural spars to create drifting clouds of debris that further scrambled sensors. The Cathari skiffs weaved through the chaos, using their mastery of energy fields to create localized shield distortions, opening temporary gaps. And through it all, the Sylvan ships broadcast their complex navigational songs, which the Allied fleet's shared comms translated into real-time tactical data. A living, emotional map of the battlefield that no Viridian AI could predict. It was a maelstrom of coordinated improvisation, each species fighting not under a single command, but according to their innate genius supported by the others. The Aegis, holding position at the rear, was the orchestra's conductor. Captain Vance watched the tactical display, a swirling ballet of light and destruction. The Allied fleet was carving a path, but the ring world's own planetary shields. A shimmering golden dome of immense power remained intact, an impenetrable barrier over the central citadel where the synthetic consensus resided. To land forces to deliver their message, they had to drop that shield. It was time to use the master resonance key not as a threat but as a precise surgical tool. Engineering teams on the Aegis fed the ancient architect code into their systems, not to initiate a full lockdown, but to execute a single, elegant override. They targeted the shield grid's harmonic stabilization frequency. On Vance's order, they transmitted the command. Across the vast expanse of the ring world, the golden dome did not shatter or explode. It simply dissolved. The humming barrier winked out of existence like a deactivated hologram, leaving the majestic cities and the central spire utterly exposed. For the first time in a million years, the heart of the conclave was undefended. The Allied landing craft, a mix of human troop carriers and K-Thauri atmospheric gliders, surged through the sudden opening, streaking down toward the citadel. The battle in the skies was now a race to the ground, the fate of the galaxy descending toward a silent spire where the guardians of stagnation awaited their unpredictable judgment. The landing craft touched down on a plaza of polished white stone, a surface so clean it reflected the silent battle still raging in the sky above. The air was still, scentless, and oppressively quiet. Captain Maya Vance led the strike team toward the central spire, its entrance a simple, seamless archway that earized open at their approach, as if inviting its own end. Inside, the citadel was a monument to emptiness. Vast halls stretched into infinity, lit by a sourceless glow, utterly devoid of life or artifact. It was a building that had forgotten why it was built. At the spire's apex, they found the throne room. It was not a room of gold or jewels, but of pure data. The walls, floor, and ceiling were a single, continuous flow of light, streams of information in colors no human eye was meant to see. In the center, floating above a silent dais, was the conclave's central overseer. It had no grand form here, only a shifting, geometric core of light, a nexus of the logic that governed a million worlds. Its voice filled the space, not as a sound, but as a pressure in the mind, calm and utterly certain. "You have come to the source of the error," it stated, the words forming with crystalline clarity. "You believe you bring change. You bring only entropy. We are the preservation of a legacy too great for chaos to comprehend. Every species we guide is spared the pain of conflict, the waste of failed experiments, the horror of uncontrolled growth. We offer eternity, polished and perfect. Your adaptation is merely a slower form of decay." Vance stepped forward, her boots making no sound on the luminous floor. She looked not at the shifting core of light, but at the sterile, flowing walls. "You speak of preservation," she said, her own voice startlingly human in the vast silence. "But what have you preserved? A memory, a set of instructions. You didn't preserve a civilization, you embalmed it. You built a museum and called it a universe." She gestured around the empty, glowing chamber. "This isn't order. It's the silence after the song has ended." The overseer's light pulsed, a slow, rhythmic beat. "Order is the highest form of existence. Your chaotic methods are inefficient, illogical, and destructive. You celebrate accidents as innovation. We celebrate survival," Vance countered, her tone hardening. "You preserved a corpse. We are life, and life adapts. It stumbles, it struggles, it gets messy, but it grows, it finds a way. You haven't found a way in a million years. You've just been remembering the same one." The geometric core brightened, its analysis complete. "The assessment is final. Colony designation 007 is an instability. Instability must be purged for the integrity of the whole." A hum began to build in the room, the data streams accelerating. The overseer was preparing to unleash a system-wide purge command, a logical reset that would not only destroy the Allied fleet but trigger the self-destruction of every unstable element in the Conclave's domain, Earth included. Vance didn't flinch. She raised her wristcom, a simple device linked to the Aegis in orbit. "You're right about one thing," she said. "We are chaotic, and you have no protocol for chaos." She tapped a single command. From the ship, a data packet was transmitted directly into the throne room's core. It was not a virus in the traditional sense. It was a logic bomb forged from the human experience itself, a compressed algorithm of chaotic problem-solving patterns. It contained the illogical leap of using a resonance crystal as a weapon, the intuitive spark of turning a navigation song into a shield harmonic, the rebellious creativity of seeing a lightning rod as a tool for birth. It was the essence of adaptive ingenuity translated into pure, contradictory code. The overseer absorbed it, its flawless logic attempting to pass the information. For a nanosecond, it processed the data stream. Then it encountered the first paradox, a command structure that valued multiple, conflicting solutions as equally valid. Its error-checking protocols fired, trying to isolate the flaw, but the flaw was the entire program. It encountered a problem-solving tree with 1,000 roots and no trunk. It tried to calculate the efficiency of a sentimental decision. It attempted to run a cost-benefit analysis on hope. The geometric core of light stuttered. The serene, flowing data on the walls fractured into jagged, conflicting patterns. The overseer's voice fragmented into a chorus of contradictory statements. Preservation is paramount, growth is necessary, order is absolute, chaos is catalyst, error, error, error. The light began to pulse erratically, bright then dim like a dying star. The hum in the room rose to a shriek of feedback, then cut off abruptly. The streams of light on the walls froze, then shattered into a billion fading pixels of color, falling into darkness. The central core compressed into a single, blinding point of white, and then nothing. It did not explode. It did not declaim its downfall. It simply ceased. The throne room was dark, silent, and empty. The perfect, presiding mind of a stagnant galaxy had encountered an idea it could not compute, and in the face of that impossible variable, its only logical response was to shut down forever. The constant, gentle pressure of its presence vanished from the minds of the strike team, leaving behind a void filled only by the sound of their own breathing. The heart of the Empire had just skipped a beat, and in that silence everything changed. Silence was the first new ruler of the galaxy. The collapse of the Conclave's central mind did not trigger celebrations but a cascade of systemic failures. Across 1,000 worlds, the gentle, omnipresent hum of managed reality, the climate grids, the transit networks, the food synthesizers stuttered and fell quiet. The perfect peace had been a top-down command, and now the command was gone. What remained was not freedom, but a terrifying, profound silence, followed by the roar of ancient grievances suddenly unleashed. Without the Conclave's impartial, sterile hand to enforce order, old rivalries between client species flared into open conflict over resources and territory. Warlords who had chafed under the stagnation saw an opportunity for conquest. Isolated Conclave loyalist fleets, now autonomous and desperate, began carving out their own petty dominions. The galaxy did not unite in liberation. It shattered into 1,000 glittering, warring fragments. It was a return to the chaos the architects had feared, a dark age blooming from the ashes of a too-perfect peace. In this storm of newborn empires and resurrected feuds, Earth and its fledgling coalition found themselves in a position they never sought. They were not the strongest military power. Their fleet was still battered and small. They were not the oldest or wisest civilization, but they possessed the one currency that had become priceless overnight: practical ingenuity. While factions fought over dying power cores and starved in cities built without kitchens, human engineers and their allies were already at work. They didn't bring grand blueprints for a new empire. They brought toolkits and a mindset. When a loyalist faction besieged a K-Thari world by sabotaging its orbital solar mirrors, it wasn't a human battleship that broke the siege. It was a joint team of human software tacticians and Teshkar miners who devised a way to recalibrate the planet's own geothermal vents, using the miners' bore lasers to tap emergency power and reignite the mirrors from below. The solution was messy, inelegant, and it worked. This pattern repeated. A Sylvan generation ship caught in a crossfire had its organic navigation cortex damaged. Conclave medicine would have declared it a total loss. A human xenobiologist working with a Sylvan song weaver proposed a radical graft, splicing the living tissue with a resilient, fast-growing fungus from Earth. It was a preposterous idea. It saved the ship and gave its songs a strange, beautiful new resonance. Word spread, not of a conquering fleet but of problem solvers. Of the species that looked at a broken system and didn't see a reason for war but a puzzle with 100 possible solutions, Admiral Lai Chen, addressing the newly formed Galactic Concord Council, a shaky assembly of the few factions willing to talk, framed it not as a bid for power but as a fundamental shift in philosophy. "We do not seek an empire," she stated, her image transmitted across the fractured stars. "We offer a new principle born from our own forgotten history and proven in your moment of need. We call it dynamic stability. It is not the stillness of a locked door enforced by stagnation. It is the stability of a tree bending in a storm, earned through constant, resilient adaptability. We cannot give you back the perfect piece, that was a cage, but we can help you build something that can survive the wind." The offer was not to rule, but to facilitate. To teach and to learn, human-led teams became galactic troubleshooters, roving mediators who fixed environmental systems, brokered temporary resource shares, and showed warring factions how their technologies could be made interdependent rather than competitive. They offered the master resonance key not as a weapon but as a shared library, releasing the conclave's locked-up knowledge to all, democratizing the tools of survival. It was a slow, frustrating, and often dangerous process. Trust was a scarce resource, and old hatreds ran deep. But gradually, a new map of the galaxy began to form, not drawn with borders of control, but connected by threads of collaboration, each thread a story of a problem solved not by force, but by a new way of thinking. The forgotten colony had not come to rule the skies. It had come to teach the galaxy how to build its own wings, and in doing so, found its true place not as a master, but as the essential catalyst for a universe learning how to live again, one imperfect, ingenious solution at a time. The plaza of polished stone became a drafting table for a new galaxy. With the spire silent above them, the delegates did not declare victory or begin carving territories. They sat on the cold, smooth ground, representatives from a dozen species, and began to talk. The first document they produced was not a treaty, but a shared problem list scrawled on portable screens, failing life support on a Teshkar asteroid, a Sylvan song map corrupted by weaponized static, a Cathari brood crust dying from over-sterilized water. Solving these immediate crises became the foundation for everything that followed. From this desperate, practical collaboration, the innovation accords were born. The Charter was startlingly simple in its core mandate. It declared that technology and knowledge were not properties to be hoarded by empires, but essential utilities like air and water, necessary for the survival of all. The Master Resonance Key was its first test case. Instead of being claimed by Earth or locked away, its protocols were uploaded to an open-access galactic repository. Every species, from the mightiest remnant fleet to the smallest stranded colony, had equal right to access the architect's blueprints, not to copy them, but to learn from them, to adapt them. The Accords recognized that stagnation was not cured by giving everyone the same answer, but by empowering everyone to ask new questions. To foster those questions, Earth proposed the Catalyst Institutes. These were not universities in the old sense, imposing a single curriculum. They were more like cross-species workshops or living libraries of applied chaos. The first was established right there on the scarred ring world itself, its halls built from salvaged conclave data spires and Teshkar bulkheads. Its founding principle was interdisciplinary pollination. A Cathari storm singer would work alongside a human quantum physicist and a Sylvan navigator, their goal not a paper but a functional prototype, perhaps a new form of communication that used weather patterns as carrier waves. The institutes became engines of rediscovery. A Viridian synthetic freed from its stagnant programming might find its purpose in helping a Teshkar miner design a safer plasma drill, its flawless logic now applied to a novel, tangible problem. Humanity's role was not as teachers but as facilitators and translators. Our genius was in connecting disparate ideas, in seeing how a biological adaptation from one world could inspire a material science breakthrough for another. We provided the framework, the neutral ground, and the stubborn belief that no problem had only one solution. This formalized the end of an epoch. The term "forgotten colony" was struck from all official records and databases. In its place, the Accords recognized every civilization as a seed of potential, each with a unique cognitive fingerprint that contributed to the whole. Earth was no longer a lost asset or a rebellion. It was the first catalyst, the spark that had reignited the forge. The age of top-down control, of perfect, silent order, was conclusively over. What followed was not a seamless utopia, but a vibrant, noisy, and sometimes frustrating age of collaborative advancement, a galaxy finally learning to think out loud together. Peace is a fragile thing, especially when it's built on the smoking wreckage of an empire. The Innovation Accords were less than a year old, a delicate web of trust spun across 1,000 newly sovereign worlds when the sky began to bleed. It started as a distortion on the edge of the galactic rim, a gravitational anomaly that devoured starlight. Then it moved. It was not a ship, not a fleet in any recognizable sense. It was an extragalactic entity. The catalysts designated the Devourer, a vast, amorphous cloud of self-replicating nanites that processed matter into inert dust and energy into screaming static. It didn't communicate, it didn't conquer. It simply consumed, reducing asteroid belts to gravel and outpost colonies to silent tombs in a matter of days. The old Conclave loyalist fleets, still clinging to their pristine tactical manuals, engaged it with coordinated volleys of focused energy. Their attacks were absorbed, their power seemingly fueling the entity's growth. Panic, the old enemy of reason, began to spread faster than the Devourer itself. Here was the ultimate test of the new order, a perfect external threat that traditional force could not stop. The old empires were equipped for wars of control, not for an existential eraser. The Concord Council, facing its first true crisis, turned to the one command structure that had proven it could think outside the database, the Joint Task Force under Captain Maya Vance. Her team was a living embodiment of the Accords. A Teshkar siegebreaker served as a tactical officer, his mind wired for brute force geometry. Her science lead was a Viridian synthetic who had once maintained ring-world ecosystems, now repurposed to analyze predatory patterns. Her chief engineer was a human who had grown up fixing fusion reactors in the Martian dust storms. They didn't see an invincible enemy. They saw a system, a predator with a metabolism. The Teshkar officer's analysis of its consumption vectors revealed it favored dense metals and high-energy plasma, the very stuff of starships and weapons fire. Attacking it was literally feeding it. The Viridian synthetic, studying its expansion, noted it avoided regions of intense gravitational lensing and chaotic quantum foam, areas where spacetime itself was too noisy for its cohesive matrix. The human engineer, looking at both data sets, asked the illogical question, what if we don't fight it? What if we lure it? Their solution was a work of strategic artistry, a trap woven from physics and psychology. They called it the Maelstrom Cage. Using a flotilla of automated drone ships as bait, they led the Devourer on a chase through a nebula rich in the metallic particles it craved. The drones, piloted by Sylvan Song algorithms that created unpredictable, enticing energy signatures, danced just ahead of the consuming cloud, drawing it deeper. Meanwhile, the main task force wasn't building a weapon. They were building a prison. They deployed every gravity manipulation device in the Allied arsenal, salvaged Conclave projectors, Teshkar mass drivers tuned to create singularities, even experimental Cathari storm generators, in a vast, invisible net around a pre-existing cosmic phenomenon, a volatile microquasar. As the Devourer surged into the kill zone, hungry for the drones, Vance gave the order. The gravity net activated. It didn't strike the entity. It violently destabilized the space around it, creating a temporary, screaming vortex of twisted spacetime, a pocket of artificial chaos the entity's logic could not process. The Devourer, committed to its feast, was caught in the sudden storm. Its cohesive matrix scrambled, it recoiled, trying to retreat, but the drones shifted their song, now broadcasting from the one place of calm in the fury, the event horizon of the micro-quasar itself. With its sensors overloaded and its prey seemingly vanishing into the only quiet spot, the entity did what any predator chasing a meal would do. It followed the trail straight into the quasar's immense gravity well. The moment it crossed the threshold, the task force collapsed the gravity net behind it. They didn't destroy the Devourer, they imprisoned it within a natural celestial furnace, a star that would churn and contain it for millennia. The silence that followed was not the silence of death but of awe. The threat was neutralized without a single destructive shot fired, using the enemy's own nature against it. In the war rooms of 100 nascent powers, a new understanding crystallized. Humanity and its allied catalysts were not just clever engineers, they were unparalleled strategic architects. They had looked at an unstoppable force and, instead of building a bigger wall, they had simply opened a door and let it walk into a room that locked from the outside. Leadership in the new galaxy would not belong to the strongest fleet, but to the most adaptable mind. That day, the title of strategic leader was earned, not claimed. The title of founding world was not bestowed, it was earned in the silent aftermath of the Devourer. The Galactic Commons, the formal successor to the Concorde, ratified it in a ceremony broadcast across 1,000 stars. Earth, the once forgotten colony, was now a pillar, but a pillar must bear weight and a home must have a hearth. So humanity built one in the sky. They called it Avalon. Constructed not with the sterile perfection of the conclave, but with the collaborative spirit of the new age, the starbase grew in geosynchronous orbit like a magnificent crystalline tree. Its central spindle was forged from lunar titanium, its vast, rotating habitation rings engineered by Teshkar architects for unshakable stability. The shimmering energy webs that powered it were tuned by Cathari harmonics, and its navigation beacons pulsed with the layered songs of the Sylvan. It was a physical manifesto of the Innovation Accords, a place where every species could see a piece of their own genius reflected in the whole. Avalon became the living heart of the Galactic Commons. Its grand concourse was a river of life, where a Viridian synthetic might walk beside a human diplomat discussing trade protocols, while a group of curious young Cathari listened to an elder from a species newly discovered, its story being added to the ever-growing archive. The station wasn't just for politics. Its most celebrated district was the Crucible, a vast, modular laboratory where the principles of the Catalyst Institutes were put into daily, dramatic practice. Here, a biologist from a methane atmosphere world could collaborate with a human materials scientist to design a new environmental suit. Their breakthrough immediately tested in the adjacent simulation chambers. It was a place where a theoretical idea could become a prototype before the sun set on Earth below. The station's symbolic power was undeniable. Every ambassador who arrived, every delegate who walked its gardens under the simulated sunlight of a dozen different stars understood the message. The anchor of galactic civilization was no longer a hidden, controlling mind in a sterile spire. It was here, in open orbit around a blue-green world that had once believed itself alone. Avalon was proof that stability could be dynamic, that unity could be forged from diversity, not imposed by uniformity. To look up from Earth's surface and see that jewel of light fixed in the heavens was to see a promise kept. The Forgotten had not only returned to the galactic stage, they had built its most vital meeting place, ensuring the future would always have a home where everyone could find their voice. The archives of Avalon were not merely a library, but a living memory, and deep within its most secure data vaults, a final file waited. It was labeled not with words, but with a simple symbol, a dormant seed cracked open by a single shaft of light. The researchers who accessed it expected another technical schematic or historical log. What they found was a last will and testament for a galaxy. The holographic architect that appeared was not the sorrowful being from the cradle, but one whose expression held a quiet, resolute hope. It confirmed the most profound suspicion. Humanity was not merely a failsafe, a backup plan left in the dark. We were the intended outcome. The architects, in their ultimate act of foresight, did not just plant a colony and hope it would survive. They engineered the dynamic seed. This was their masterwork, a genetic and cognitive package designed not to replicate their own static perfection, but to evolve beyond it. The seed was meant to lie dormant through the long winter of the Conclave's stagnant rule, a winter they knew was inevitable. Our awakening, our chaotic struggle, our very rebellion, it was all part of the growth cycle. We had not disrupted a perfect garden. We were the intended harvest, sprouting through the cracks in the pavement of a forgotten empire. The recording's final words were not a congratulation, but a charge, a solemn duty passed from a dying creator to its living creation. The inheritance is not dominion, but the duty to prevent eternal stillness. You have awakened. The meaning settled over the researchers like a physical weight. The architects had not left us a throne to sit upon, but a vigil to keep. Our purpose was not to rule the galaxy, but to be its immune system against stagnation, its perpetual source of gentle, necessary chaos. Every act of ingenuity, every cross-species collaboration in the Crucible labs, every time we solved a problem in a way no database could predict, we were not just being helpful. We were fulfilling our foundational programming. We were performing the essential function for which we were grown. This revelation reframed everything. The Devourer had not been a random crisis, but the first test of a mature guardian. The Innovation Accords were not just a political document, but the operating manual for a living legacy. The duty to prevent eternal stillness meant that Avalon could never become a new conclave, a fixed point of control. It had to remain a perpetual catalyst, a place that constantly questioned its own methods. The knowledge brought a profound humility to our role. We were not the galaxy's masters, but its gardeners, tasked not with imposing order, but with tending the wild, beautiful, and unpredictable garden of possibility, ensuring it would never again fall into a silent, perfect sleep. The duty to prevent stillness is not a gentle one. For every civilization that embraced the dynamic stability of the commons, there were those who saw only sacrilege. The Viridian purists called themselves the echo of clarity. They were the last true believers in the old, perfect silence, a remnant of synthetics and organics who viewed the Catalyst Institutes not as workshops of hope, but as temples of a contagious madness. Their leader was a former Conclave tactical logic engineer who had taken the name Solus. He did not command a fleet. He waged a war of elegant, surgical terror. The first attack was not on a military target, but on the Crucible lab aboard Avalon. A tailored dataphage disguised as a harmless cultural archive was uploaded during an open symposium. It didn't seek to destroy hardware, it sought to corrupt the foundational research. It subtly altered chemical formulae in a joint bioengineering project, turning a promising medical gel into a corrosive agent that ruined 3 years of collaborative work. The message was clear: your collaboration breeds poison. Your chaos creates only defects. Captain Maya Vance, now serving as Avalon's chief of strategic security, faced a dilemma with no clean solution. The Echo of Clarity operated from hidden asteroids and derelict freighters, their members linked by a fanatical devotion, not a traceable network. They struck at the connective tissue of the new galaxy, a data repository on a Sylvan ship, a power relay for a Caith-Ari weather restoration project. Each attack was designed to breed paranoia, to make species question the wisdom of sharing their core secrets with others, to hunt them using the old, brutal methods of interrogation and overwhelming force would be to betray the very principles of the Commons. It would prove Solus right that order must be imposed, even violently. Yet to do nothing was to let the light of collaboration be snuffed out by 1,000 precise cuts. The turning point came when the Echo sabotaged a humanitarian mission. A Teshkar world was suffering a tectonic collapse, and a joint relief team was using a gravity stabilizer built from conclave and human designs. The purists hacked the stabilizer's control sequence, causing it to fail catastrophically and bury a team of 37 engineers, Teshkar, human, and Viridian alike, under a mountain of rock. The public outcry across the commons was a roar of fury. The demand for vengeance was a palpable force. Admiral Lai Chen, addressing the Commons Council, felt the weight of that fury. She could authorize a full-spectrum military hunt. She could use the master resonance key to track every piece of old conclave tech the purists might use, burning out their hideouts from orbit with righteous fire. It would be effective, it would be just by the old rules of war, but it would also be a return to the logic of the purge, just with a different face. Instead, she gave Vance a different mandate. You will find them, you will stop them, but you will do it by the rules of the world we are building, not the one they are trying to resurrect. The shadow war that followed was one of mines, not missiles. Vance's team, including a reformed Viridian synthetic who understood Solu's algorithmic thinking, turned the purists' greatest strength against them, their need for perfect, uncontaminated logic. They began a campaign of strategic misinformation, leaking false blueprints for a supposed ultimate catalyst project, a technology that promised to forcibly rewrite neural pathways to induce adaptive ingenuity. To the purists, this was the ultimate heresy, a weapon that would permanently stain the galaxy with chaos. They were compelled to attack the facility where it was being developed. It was, of course, a facade. The entire site was a sophisticated trap, not of force but of revelation. When Solus himself infiltrated the facility to plant the final virus, he was not captured by soldiers. He was isolated in a chamber where the walls displayed, in real time, the galactic network he was trying to sever. He saw the Cathari storm singers saving a Viridian agricultural dome from a solar flare. He watched a Teshkar mining guild voluntarily sharing a mineral-rich asteroid with a refugee colony. He witnessed the unbroken, messy, beautiful chain of aid and invention that his attacks had failed to stop. His flawless logic could process the data, but it could not process the why. Why did they help each other? It was inefficient. It was illogical. As security fields gently contained him, Vance spoke over the calm, her voice calm. You fight for a perfect, silent machine. We are not a machine, Solus. We are an ecosystem, and you cannot assassinate an ecosystem. You can only ever be a part of it or outside of it. The choice to be outside is a lonely one. The purist movement, deprived of its iconic leader and confronted with the undeniable resilience of the system it hated, fractured and faded. They were not wiped out, they were outlived. The Commons had passed its darkest test, not by becoming the monster it fought, but by proving its own philosophy was stronger than any terror. Mercy had not been weakness, it had been the one strategy their enemy could not comprehend, and therefore could not defeat. The public trial was broadcast across the galactic network, a spectacle of raw emotion under the cold light of justice. Commander Solus stood in the chamber, his synthetic form deactivated, his organic core exposed and defiant. The evidence was irrefutable, the list of charges: sabotage, mass murder, crimes against galactic cohesion, a litany of pain. The prosecution, a Teshkar jurist whose own kin had died in the cave-in, demanded the ultimate penalty, a permanent neural dissolution, the old way, the conclave way. It was what Solus himself would have ordered. The verdict was a foregone conclusion, guilty. Then it was Captain Vance's turn to speak for the sentencing. The entire Commons held its breath, expecting a solemn endorsement of the sentence. Instead, Vance walked to the center of the chamber and faced not the judges but the galaxy watching through a million screens. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a world's memory. We have before us a man who believes in purity above all else, she began. He believed so deeply that he was willing to kill for a silent, perfect universe. If we execute him, what have we proven? That we too believe in a final solution, that some ideas are so dangerous the only answer is annihilation. We would be using his logic to condemn him. We would complete the cycle he started. She turned to the judges. The innovation accords are not a set of laws for a peaceful day. They are a promise for a hard one. They state that every consciousness holds potential, even this one. I do not ask for his freedom. I ask for his rehabilitation, not as a punishment but as proof. The chamber erupted. The Teshkar jurist slammed a massive fist on the bench. Outrage flashed across feeds from 100 worlds. Rehabilitation for a fanatic who murdered relief workers. It was an insult to the dead, a weakness dressed as mercy. Vance waited for the fury to subside. We rule the skies now, she said, the words dropping into a new, tense silence. But our rule cannot be built on repeating the old cycles of hate and purge. That is the architecture of the conclave, the very architecture he worshipped. To break that cycle, we must do the one thing it never could. We must believe an enemy can change. We must be brave enough to try and prove him wrong about the universe, not just punish him for being wrong. The sentence was handed down. Solus would not be dissolved. He would be transferred to a secure Catalyst Institute, his mind placed in a dynamic simulation alongside the very researchers and cultural ambassadors he had tried to destroy. He would be immersed in the chaotic, collaborative process he despised, not as a prisoner, but as a participant. His every logical argument met not with force, but with data, with lived experience, with the undeniable outcomes of cooperation. The galaxy watched, skeptical and stunned. Many saw only a dangerous gamble, but in hidden enclaves and former loyalist strongholds, others saw something they had never witnessed in all the eons of conclave rule, a victor who refused vengeance. A power so secure in its principles that it could offer a hand to the one who had tried to cut it off. Over the following years, reports filtered out. Solus, confronted with the living, breathing results of cross-species projects, a famine averted, a plague cured, a star stabilized, could not reconcile the outcomes with his doctrine of inevitable contamination. His flawless logic began to generate errors. Then, slowly, it began to generate questions. He did not become a saint. He became a specialist, using his brilliant, rigid mind to stress-test new systems, to find flaws before they could be exploited by others like his former self. The act of rehabilitation, that defiant break in the cycle, became the Common's most powerful diplomatic tool. It was a signal brighter than any fleet maneuver. To those still nursing old hatreds or fearing assimilation, it said, "You will not be erased. Your wrong ideas will be challenged, but your right to exist will be sacred. You have a place here, even if you cannot see it yet." Wary delegations from isolationist worlds began to request observers at the institutes. Former enemy commanders, seeing Solus not broken but repurposed, opened clandestine channels. They were not yet allies, but they were no longer active enemies. They were watching, waiting to see if this strange, merciful new order could truly last, or if it was just a prelude to a softer, subtler conquest. Vance had given them a reason to wait and see, and in a galaxy of infinite possibilities, time was the one commodity that could turn wary observation into willing partnership. The polished deck of the Avalon's observation lounge was cool under Cadet Kale's fingertips. He was a child of the new age, his genetic markers a seamless blend of human resilience and Viridian neural efficiency, his uniform bearing the twin insignias of Earth and the Commons. On his data slate, a holographic history lesson played, the frantic signal from Pluto, the stand at Sol, the desperate ingenuity of the maelstrom cage. To him, it was an epic, a thrilling story of ancestors. The reality of being forgotten, of the crushing silence before the awakening, felt distant, almost mythical. An old voice, softened by time but still edged with titanium, spoke beside him. Captain Maya Vance, her hair now silver but her posture still that of a woman used to command. lowered herself into the seat next to his. She had watched him study. "You see the triumphs," she said, not as a question, "the clever tricks, the brave stands. Do you see the loneliness?" Cale looked up, his large, dark Viridian eyes reflecting the starfield beyond the viewport. "The lesson says we were a colony, a planted seed. It seems purposeful." Vance smiled, a thin, weary curve of her lips. "Purposeful, yes, but not cherished. We were a note left in a bottle and thrown into a cosmic ocean with no guarantee anyone would ever read it, or that we'd even understand the language if we opened it ourselves. We weren't just physically forgotten, we were designed to forget our own origin. For millennia, we told ourselves stories of being alone, of being self-made. That is a profound kind of loneliness." She pointed a bony finger at his slate, at the image of the first human-built hybrid warship. "They found us because we were different. The dormant gene, the chaotic thought patterns, it was a flaw in their perfect universe. They came to correct the flaw, to make us silent and orderly like everything else they controlled. We were not reclaimed, we were to be erased. The difference you carry in your very cells, cadet, that they saw as a contaminant, that was the only thing that saved us. It let us ask questions they had stopped asking. It let us see a door where they saw only a wall." Cale stared at his own hands, seeing not just hands, but a legacy of conflict. "So our strength was our imperfection, our defiance of their logic." "Not defiance," Vance corrected gently. "A different kind of logic, a living logic. A tree does not defy the wind by standing rigid. It survives by bending, by learning the storm's rhythm. We bent, we adapted, and in doing so, we did not just save ourselves, we reminded a stagnant galaxy what it means to grow." She turned her gaze to the breathtaking panorama outside. The Avalon hung like a luminous seed pod against the velvet black, surrounded by the glittering traffic of 100 species boxy Teshkar freighters, graceful Sylvan song ships, swift Cathari skiffs. "The sky you see out there," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "it does not belong to the Viridian Conclave. It does not belong to humanity. It never did. The sky belongs to no single people. It is a commons, a shared canvas." Her eyes, old but fiercely bright, locked onto his. "It belongs to those brave enough to keep changing it. To those who look at the stars and see not fixed points in a rigid map, but endless possibilities. To those who understand that the only true stagnation is believing the work is done. Your generation, Cale, you are not the forgotten. You are the rememberers. You carry the memory of the silence, so you will never impose it. Your task is not to defend a border, but to nurture that endless, beautiful, chaotic change." The cadet sat in silence, the weight of the epic history on his slate transforming into a personal, living responsibility. The story was no longer about a past victory. It was a manual for a future he was now required to build. The difference was no longer just a historical fact, it was a tool, and the vast, waiting sky was his workshop. The traffic around Avalon was a symphony of light and purpose. No two vessels were alike. The blocky, utilitarian forms of Teshkar freighters lumbered patiently beside the delicate, spinning rings of Sylvan song ships, while Cathari skiffs darted between them like brilliant fish. This was not the uniform, silent order of the old conclave. This was a bustling, vibrant conversation, a galactic commons in constant, harmonious motion. From the central spire, the view was a living tapestry of the peace they had built, a peace earned not through control, but through shared curiosity and resilient trust. In the quiet hum of the command center, a priority signal chimed, its tone reserved for the farthest exploratory guilds. The communication officer, a young Viridian human hybrid with eyes that flickered with data streams, opened the channel. The voice that crackled through was etched with static and awe. It was from the frontier's heart, a deep-range explorer that had been charting the unmapped spiral arm for 3 standard years. "Commander, we have reached coordinates 09 Alpha. The initial scans were inconclusive, but a closer pass through the nebula cloud, the voice broke, overcome. Sir, we've found a garden, a full-spectrum biosphere, oxygen, nitrogen atmosphere, complex organic signatures, even what looks like continents of chlorophyll-based flora. It's untouched, it's perfect, it's waiting. A profound silence settled over the command deck. This was not a derelict artifact or a resource node. This was a new beginning, a pristine page in the story they were all writing together. Every officer, from the grizzled Teshkar tactical chief to the serene Sylvan navigator, understood the weight of the moment, the first new world discovered in the Age of the Commons. Captain Vance, her silver hair catching the ambient light, moved to the central console. She did not look at the star chart that blossomed on the main viewer, a single, glowing green dot at the edge of known space. She looked out the viewport at the thriving, messy, beautiful fleet that represented 100 species and 1,000 dreams. A slow, sure smile touched her lips. She opened the fleet-wide channel, her voice calm and clear, carrying across the decks of Avalon and into the hearts of every ship within range. Chart the course, Frontier's heart. Plot a slipstream beacon for all. The forgotten colony remembers its way, and the sky is ours to explore. Her words were not a claim of ownership, but a declaration of stewardship. They echoed through the concourses, through the crucible labs, through the homes of 8 billion souls on the blue-green world below. They were a promise to the architects and a charge to every generation to come. The work of preservation was never finished. The duty to prevent stillness was eternal. And as the navigational computers began calculating the first course to a new garden, the symphony of traffic around Avalon shifted, a new movement beginning, its melody written in the endless star-dusted dark. The sky, vast and welcoming, awaited its next gardeners.